Hello and welcome to the Overland Journal podcast. I am your host, Scott Brady, and I am here with my co-host, Matt Scott. What are we going to talk about today, Matt?
We're talking about electricity. We're talking about the future of overlanding. By default, electric vehicles. I know there's going to be a lot of people that don't want to hear that.
Well, I don't think anybody really wants to hear it because we want to hear the clatter of diesels off into the future, but the change is happening. Right?
Yeah, and it's going to happen so much faster than you expect. Now, I remember the first time I drove an electric car. I was actually, and this sounds relatively exotic and pretentious, but it was on the Portimao circuit in Portugal with the new Jaguar I-Pace. And they sent us out in the Jaguar F-Type, little, two-door sports car, purpose-built vehicle, and did some laps and got some feedback on it. And it's like, oh, wow, well, this Jaguar's nice. And then they throw us in the electric car, which is just a Jaguar I-Pace. It's a crossover, relatively pedestrian looking,
right.
Attractive, but you didn't expect much of it. And it was a hoot to drive. I mean, instant torque, people, is a huge thing. I want to say it had around a 300-mile range, which people, for some reason, they can have a gas vehicle that has a 175-mile range by the time they put their bumpers and winches and things on it, and that's totally acceptable. But 300 miles an electric car is a no-go. But anyways, where I'm getting at this is electric cars of the future. It dawned on me right there. The things they're able to do with torque vectoring, where they can send the power, the things that they're going to be able to do with, solid state batteries being structural components in the chassis. So you don't have this big box just sitting somewhere taking up space.
Even the way that torque just works with an electric motor is not only
off-road.
Yeah, it's perfect for off-road, and the infinite control over that.
Yeah,
you have it. There's no turbo lag. There's no way.
There's nothing.
Not building horsepower in a unique curve. It's all very linear, and especially on the torque side, and that provides a lot better driver control, I think.
Yeah,
and it's just like any other disruptive technology. It was just this last week that Tesla became the most valuable automotive manufacturer in the United States. So these disruptions are coming, whether we want them to or not.
Exactly.
And I was just recently on the Infiniti 30th anniversary launch, and they were talking about future planning for vehicles. And they've got 5 new vehicles coming out over the next 3 years, and 3 of the 5 vehicles are electric.
It has to be. I mean, the internal combustion engine has really, it should have hit its peak by now. I mean, we're going on over 100 years of the internal combustion engine in mass production. And they're finally actually getting reliable. I mean, you look even 10, 15, 20 years ago with marques like Toyota, they were still having failures. I don't know, as an overlander, one of the things I look at is reliability and simplicity. Well, I don't have to have a starter. I don't have to have an alternator. There's so many. You don't need
a fuel pump.
There's no fuel pump to fail.
And a lot of these components can be solid state now. Certainly with the adoption of any new technology, there's going to be a reliability curve, and there's going to be an adjustment on the part of the consumer. I remember when fuel injection even first started becoming popular for four-wheel drive vehicles. And there was a lot of pushback from people that would say, I can fix my carburetor out in the field. Mm-hmm. Well, it turns out now with a new Toyota Tacoma, you never even think about the fuel injection system because it always works. Maybe every once in a while you got to change out a fuel pump or an injector goes bad. But that is very rare. So manufacturers have really learned that reliability is a key towards future sales. And it's a key towards consumer impression towards their brand. Yeah. So even when they make electric vehicles, they're going to be very mindful of the fact that these things need to be reliable.
I saw a Tesla Model 3 a few weeks ago in Bay of LA in Baja. So I'm just going to go ahead and leave it there. It can be done. The future is happening now.
It is. And didn't you say that there was a trip maybe in a Volkswagen that's already gone?
Yeah, I want to say it was like a Volkswagen Passat or Jetta or something like that. It was definitely a European spec vehicle. Yeah, that from recollection drove all the way from Amsterdam or somewhere in the Netherlands all the way to Sydney. And that's the guy, again, if I remember correctly, unfortunately, we couldn't pull up the story on it, but the guy just kind of traveled around and met people and charged his vehicle at people's houses. And I don't know, I think that's a huge part of travel is that, that connection. You right. have to stop in cities and you have to charge your car.
You do.
In the same way, but you have to get food and you have to get groceries and you have to get all that kind of stuff when you're traveling.
And I'm thinking back, I think it was 8 years ago that I did a trip with Brian McVickers and Austin Andrews, and we went out with the Jeep J8, and we took along a Zero dual sport motorcycle. And it was certainly one of the first long distance electric motorcycle rides. We put baggage on the bike, all the camping gear, everything that you needed to travel.
Yeah.
And the only thing that we did was we brought the Jeep along to charge it every night because at that time, the battery capacities were much less and they hadn't really optimized the range. But I was shocked how we could get 45 to 50 miles off road with a motorcycle like that. And it actually did really well. The only thing that's the most disconcerting on a motorcycle is you totally lose engine braking. So
yeah, and you got to have a clutch.
You got to have really, you got to have really good brakes on the thing. So it's important to recognize that driving habits do change.
Yeah.
And I think that left foot braking becomes even more critical for the driver because of that on-demand torque.
Yeah. I mean, I think things are going to be different, but things are supposed to be different. We're supposed to, I don't know, as Americans, we're supposed to embrace change. We're supposed to embrace progress. And I really hope that the overland community doesn't just, kind of stonewall the idea of electric cars. I mean, there's been a lot of positive mentions of Rivian. I think they've really hit the nail on the head. I mean, do you know how many miles they're claiming on a
300 miles out of the vehicle? And if you looked at the Overland Expo last year in Flagstaff, when they had the vehicle on display, the response to it was overwhelmingly positive. And it kind of makes sense. Overlanders in general they like the idea of things that are new. They like the idea of exploration. Many of them tend to come from technology because it facilitates traveling and life on the road. So I was really impressed with the size of the crowd that developed around that vehicle and the very positive communications that happened. Obviously, there's a fear behind the idea of running out of gas. And the reason why we don't tend to run out of gas is that we can bring extra fuel along with us. And then the gas infrastructure around the country is massive.
Yes.
It's extensive. So when you go across the canning stock route in Australia, there's only one place to refuel, and that's about 1,100 kilometers into the trip. So that's a very long distance to try to drive an electric vehicle. So for the current time frame, it's not possible to do every form of overlanding with an electric vehicle. But if you think about North American overlanders in general, how long of a trip are they really doing between fuel stops?
Yeah, that's the thing is people are always driving to the max. I mean, if you're driving, if you're on an overland trip, which to me is also a cultural thing, you're supposed to be stopping, you're supposed to be going on hikes, you're supposed to be seeing things. If you're consistently driving 500 miles a day, what are you seeing? What's the point?
Not much. Not much.
It's become popular to hate electric cars in America, and I don't know why. It's popular to hate Tesla. Why is it popular to hate Tesla? The GM and Ford and Chrysler products they've been giving you are so superior. No, they're giving you the minimum for the most they can charge you.
That's right. All of them are. Yeah.
All of them are. And yeah, I'm sure to an extent Tesla is doing the same thing.
And Ford is obviously recognizing electric vehicles. They've done some big investments into Rivian.
Yeah.
And we're going to see, and so is Amazon. So when you end up with that kind of capital behind your new venture, it's pretty exciting. I think it certainly has its place. I think the biggest challenge for electric vehicles around overland travel is when you like to go shorter distances off-road and you like to camp a lot. So a good example of that would be like in southern Utah, if you were doing the route through canyon lands and you're going through Beef Basin and all of that. That takes days to cross all of that.
Yeah.
And it is a long enough distance that it would be difficult to charge the vehicle. So, and obviously solar is not anywhere near sufficient to charge. We like the idea of being able to put out 3,000 watts worth of solar. And
until you realize what 3,000 watts of solar
it is not enough.
Encompasses,
it's
that's a lot of space.
And it's still not even possible to charge the vehicle properly off of that.
No, it is not.
So you end up bringing along, the only real solution is you bring along a generator that consumes gasoline and you charge it that way. And that may be the way to do it on trips like that. That might be the solution around it, is that you have some form of a generator that you bring along. But those are the only real scenarios where you end up wanting to camp for multiple days. You're using air conditioning, you're charging components off of the vehicle, you're running a fridge off of the vehicle, which all of those things are pulling electricity. And those are the scenarios where an electric vehicle becomes less ideal. But the vast majority of overland routes, including the Mojave Road and everything else, can be done with an electric vehicle easily today.
Yeah, but I'm not worried about today. This is not a purchase that people are making today, right?
Unless it's you. What did you?
Well, yeah. You know, I have a pre-order on one of those. I put $100 down on a Tesla Cybertruck. You know, I mainly just to piss people off. Like if you want to piss off a baby boomer, buy a Tesla. If you look at the cost of, the cost per kilowatt hour of battery storage, it's a graph line that goes straight down.
It's impressive. You showed that to me.
Yeah.
And there were years where the cost from just one year to the next dropped as much as 23%. The last year being one of the smallest amount of drop, which makes sense once you start to distill down to its basic components and demand goes up for some of the raw materials, that will start to level off. But to see a multi-fold reduction in the cost of a battery that it takes to power these units, that's very exciting.
Yeah, I mean that's how technology works, right? I mean, I remember my first digital camera. I want to say it was something about $1 per megabyte for the little Sony memory stick, right? And being around kind of film people and really being into photography, everybody told me, "Oh, digital, it's not going anywhere. It's too expensive. It's a niche thing."
Right.
Like, okay, well, how do you feel now? That criticism never comes back. But what's 128 gigabytes of solid state cost now?
Next to nothing. You get it in a thumb drive.
Yeah, I mean, what's a terabyte cost?
Yeah,
the same thing.
$200.
The same thing can and will happen. May not be as extreme, but you can't tell what the future is going to unfold. And the fact that we already have vehicles we're at like pushrod, straight 8 technology in terms of what electricity can do.
Right.
It's going to get better. It's going to get cooler. But they already
rapidly, I think.
They already meet demands. I mean, most people drive 40 miles a day or less. So when people tell me that, 300 miles or 350 miles doesn't work for me. Well, people generally just being obtuse.
And I think it comes back to your point that you've made in previous podcasts, which is the difference between want and need.
Yeah.
I think people need electric vehicles oftentimes. And I think that the current range and the current mileage of an electric vehicle meets all of their current needs, even their camping and backcountry travel needs. What they want is this idea that they could go travel across the Simpson Desert, or they could cross the Sahara in their vehicle.
Yeah.
And I think it's part of our identity, is this idea of being independent and this idea of being able to leave at a moment's notice and go on a long adventure.
Yeah.
I think that that's still very much a part of the ethos of overlanding. It's this being prepared idea, and this idea of sticking with a current technology, because it does afford the ability to do something like cross the Simpson Desert. I think that appeals to a lot of people.
I know people that have crossed the Simpson Desert in an EV.
Yeah, there you go.
Literally, it had a lot of solar panels on. It was a little chimney. Denny French, I want to say.
That's awesome.
The Piranha guy.
Yeah. But isn't that exciting though?
Yeah.
That kind of thing is coming along. And I think even more important than that is that as this technology continues to develop and as people continue to consume it, consumer demand will drive even more innovation. It'll rapidly change the way that we see an electric vehicle. And you're going to have something as capable that we see as the Rivian today, but imagine something many times more capable that has a fully adjustable suspension that isn't dependent upon CV angles. Mm-hmm. And you can gain 10 inches of additional ground clearance. I mean, it kind of blows the mind to consider what's possible.
Yeah.
Once you put the wheels or the motors at the wheels, or you put the motors where they're not dependent upon CV joints.
And you have one moving component then.
Yeah.
It might be more than that, really. The point being,
it's much more simple for sure.
I mean, the Cybertruck 35-inch tires is what they're claiming.
Right.
And you have a CEO that's actually listening to people,
right.
Some people were tweeting at Musk, "Oh, is the camping thing that you're showing in the back actually going to be is it going to happen?" And he's like, "Yeah, sure." But he actually has a track record of following up on that kind of stuff.
Eventually, if the guy can make flamethrowers, he can make camping systems.
Yeah, don't bet against Musk. Because if you're betting against Tesla, I think what people don't realize is you're betting against American innovation. Right. It's the only car company in the world right now that is pushing boundaries. But for whatever reason, people are believing the lobbyist stuff, the lobbyist opinion that wants you to stick to, internal combustion engines, wants you to stick to buying crossovers. And I don't know, but
that's absolutely happening. Although we're seeing that shift occurring, the success of the current model Teslas it drove the CEO of BMW out of his job because he did not respond quickly enough to the demand that consumers have for electric vehicles. If you think about it, so much of our life is related to technology now. Isn't it cool that our vehicle can now be that extension of technology? Yeah. And certainly some of us either want to be Luddites or we enjoy escaping from technology. And maybe you'll always have your diesel Land Cruiser.
Yeah.
So that you have
it doesn't even have a computer.
Yeah, exactly. So I think that's a great example of where that older technology will never go away. The horse didn't go away with the internal combustion engine. There'll always be cool old Land Cruisers that you can find diesel for. But I think that for daily duties and for shorter trips, these electric vehicles are really compelling. Well, maybe let's look at some of the models that are out now. What do you think about the Rivian? What's your thoughts on that?
I love the idea of the Rivian, but Rivian to me is a technology company. They're a VC backed, IP play until they make an actual vehicle, until they start producing vehicles that people can actually buy. Why I got so excited about the Tesla is a car company that's coming out with a new model. They've figured out how to make cars. They've gone through those growing pains. The Jaguar I-Pace, a lot of pain. What happens when Ford makes an electric pickup truck? I mean, Ford knows how to make a pickup truck. Chevy knows how to make a pickup truck. A lot of these components, the batteries, they come from LG or they come from Panasonic. I mean, Tesla likes to claim they have their own battery factory. Well, when you look at who's actually financing that is Panasonic. I want to say it's American AC, and 100% don't quote me on that, is the largest electric motor manufacturer. It's the same thing that happens with most car companies is they design a package that accepts components. So with Rivian, 100% all for it. I think that they're really listening to the Overland community, and I think that that's great. They're outfitting their vehicles with the right products. Bill Burke is training most of their staff and their engineers. I used to live in Fruto where Bill lives. And every week, they're sending people to get proper four-wheel drive training. That's something that Tesla is not doing. That's something that nobody else is doing.
They understand how the vehicle needs to respond to a certain driver input. I think that's really valuable. And you're probably right. Wouldn't it be interesting? And I think that this will probably be the outcome is that Rivian develops such a compelling vehicle and they have so much compelling technology behind it that they get acquired by a much larger OEM and they never end up actually making a single vehicle. That would be really interesting. It's possible. And that isn't a bad thing because Rivian is driving innovation right now. Seeing their camping system slide out of that small cubby in the truck was very cool. Seeing the low center of gravity is extremely cool. Seeing them at Overland Expo with roof tents and roof racks, all of that is very, very interesting.
I frequently hear, I hate electric cars, except for Rivian.
Yeah.
And that's cool. Yeah. Like that's what's so great about Rivian, but I don't know, Ford has a large stake in them.
So does Amazon.
Yeah. I mean, the Amazon thing is the one to watch because Jeff Bezos is another guy like Musk. Don't bet against him. Yeah. Generally, don't bet against people that have,
that many squillions.
That many squillions. Yeah. Rivian, I think, is really cool.
I think it's one of the more handsome models.
It's beautiful.
I personally find it's attractive and it also looks rugged. It looks like an off-road vehicle, but it also looks very modern at the same time. And I think that was difficult to pull off. A lot of the electric vehicles, like the new Audi, what's that one called? The AI Trail.
Their concept car.
Their concept vehicle. It looks like something that just came off the moon, which
I like.
I get it.
Dude, why are people criticizing that? That's what I just don't understand about electric cars is why are they criticizing visionary design?
Because you're right. All of the constraints change. You don't need a radiator
with Buicks.
You don't need a radiator at the front of it or at the back of it, right?
Yeah. It's not like a 4Runner or a Tacoma is an inherently beautiful or cool car. It's just a vehicle that suits the purpose and has to fit the packaging of the internal combustion engine.
And maybe that's the thing that changes. Maybe maybe for me is I want an electric vehicle that captures this visual representation of adventure, which has been set by the past.
Yeah.
Whereas if you look at something like this Audi, it's really maybe the future of what adventure looks like.
Well, Mercedes did just say they're going to make an electric G-Wagon, Scott. So there you go.
Perfect. So yeah, there's a lot of interesting ones. I mean, one of the ones that we've seen for a long time, and I hope that they are able to pull it off, is Bollinger. They've been around now for 5 or 6 years actively pursuing this project. And they do have functional prototypes now. They have a lot of interesting technology. It looks a lot like a Defender. It looks a lot like a Defender 130 and a 110, very squared off.
Looks a lot like a car that was designed with an angle grinder.
Yeah, it does. It does. And I'm just afraid that it took too long to come to market.
Yeah. I mean, the idea of a very boxy bedliner coated electric car is cool. But again, 5 years or give or take, right, that they've been out, and you can still reserve one, but you can't actually buy one. So,
right.
And
I can see their passion in the vehicle. I've talked with some of the principals and met them at different events and had some email exchanges, and you can tell how passionate they are about their product and how much they want this thing to come to market. But with the release of the Cybertruck, it already has better technology. The Rivian conceptually has better technology. I think the advantage of the Bollingers is the ultimate simplicity and the massive payload. So maybe it'll end up having some good commercial applications with
if they actually get certified at that, right? That's the thing, is this is essentially vaporware. No disrespect to Bollinger, but bring your product to market and I will treat it as an actual car.
Sure.
Great specifications we're looking at right now. 614 horsepower.
It has
668 foot-pounds of torque.
Right.
I mean,
it was a 5,000 pound payload that shocked me.
Yeah.
That's an incredible number. That's Dodge Ram 1-ton territory.
Dually. Yeah. That's awesome. But then you're looking at a 200-mile range.
Sure.
Again, I support innovation. I support small business. I want to see these guys succeed, but I don't know.
Yeah. Their moment in the sun, it's difficult. And because this is a rapidly evolving technology space, we're going to see this kind of leapfrogging occur, where there are early adopters and there's early innovators, and maybe some of their ideas are reflected in new products. But if you're not up and running now and you're not selling vehicles and you're not gaining market share like Tesla did, I think you're in a lot of trouble.
I mean, so here's a question for you, and this is a little bit off the cuff, but what happens to all of these companies? And I'm going to exclude Tesla from this because they're established. What happens when Ford and Chevy and, Ram just put an electric drivetrain in their vehicles?
Well, I suspect that what will happen, that like we've seen with Rivian, is Ford has a stake in Rivian. Yeah. So Ford is helping to incubate these ideas and bring them to market in a very safe way so that Rivian, for example, can fail and they can make mistakes and they can have missteps and they can have delayed deliveries, and it doesn't reflect negatively on Ford.
Yeah.
But smart. Ford has such a significant, this is just purely my opinion, Ford has such a significant stake in them that if they are successful and they do build a product that's viable and they do get enough orders, then Ford's just going to sweep in and make that full acquisition. And then you'll see it reflected in their product lines. They certainly need an electric Ford F-150, I think. If you want to keep it as being the best-selling truck in America, you better start thinking today about what that electric Ford F-150 looks like.
Exactly.
Here's a contrary to it, though. You see GM is doubling down on diesel, which is kind of interesting. You can see that their new Suburbans and Tahoes, and they've got these AT4 high-clearance off-road capable SUVs that have small displacement turbo diesels in them, and they're getting really good gas mileage out of them. That's really interesting. They're almost bridging the gap successfully between the two. But what you've got to hope is that GM is also innovating electric at the same time.
Yeah. I mean, they have to, right?
They have to.
Let's change the topic to, I guess, more to traveling with these things. I don't know how publicly known this is. I know there's been a lot of websites, but Charlie Borman and Ewan McGregor of Long Way Up. Well, this is called Long Way Up. They've done Long Way Down and they've done Long Way Round. I want to say they were on Harley Davidson Live Wires.
Live Wires, that's correct. And I believe they had a Rivian with them.
I believe they had one or two Rivians with them.
Correct.
Which is cool. And, I saw some of the interviews with them that said they were kind of, they did have a F-150 or some kind of vehicle that did for emergencies have the ability to charge these bikes. I think it's cool that people like this are pushing the boundaries. I mean, think of the way they changed the adventure motorcycling landscape. We need people like this to put the idea in people's heads that you can do this. I mean, you're way more experienced in touring on a motorcycle than I am. I mean, how many miles do you actually ride a day?
Not that much. You think you're going to ride a lot more than you will, because the body, especially when you're riding dynamically off-road in particular, it's very physical. It's much different than driving a four-wheel drive. So since I'm not a Baja racer, I don't have the conditioning level of a Baja racer. Off-road in a day, I'm looking at about 150 to 200 miles. When I'm riding in developing countries, because traffic is slower and the roads are less developed and you're being far more cautious as a rider, I'm still barely getting 150 to 250 miles a day in on the pavement. So the distances really are not that far when you're on a motorcycle. Your butt can only take so much in that saddle. It's the truth of it. And also, whoever said that travel was a race, it's not. There's people who do race overland, which is fine. And I think it can be an inspiration. You can learn a lot from it. And people do that as a sport, or they do it as a trick. And I think that when it comes to motorcycle travel, you really aren't traveling more than about 150 to 250 miles a day.
I certainly wouldn't want to.
No, but and not on a motorcycle with the ergonomics of a live wire, which is not a touring bike. So that would be even more brutal to ride for really long distances. An upright, very comfortable BMW with a lot of wind protection is very, very different from what the live wire is. But I think it's extremely cool that they did it. Huge props to them. And to your point, they did redefine the adventure motorcycling space and made it more popular. I think telling this story to a huge audience on network television or on high distribution cable is going to get people more excited about this.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know. I think electric motorcycles are incredibly exciting. I was really into the Alta enduros and motocross bikes before they had financial problems. However, that went down. But you're starting to see electric motorcycles in competition now. KTM and Husqvarna are starting off kind of with the youth models. What would normally be a 50 or 65 cc bike are now going electric. And you think like there's no motor to, burn the kid. There's no hot exhaust or something.
Sure.
You're starting at that young generation, and these guys they're going to work their way up. I mean, people my age probably would have started on 2-strokes and then went to 4-strokes. And that was a big progression. And you still see that 2-stroke, 4-stroke rivalry. Are we going to see 4-stroke and electric rivalry?
For sure.
I mean, there's going to be
the new Cake motorcycle is beautiful. We got a couple of the Ubco 2-wheel drive bikes here at the office, and they were super fun to ride. I mean, and they had plenty of capacity to load them up because they were designed to be used on farms. And so it has the rear wheel has a motor and the front wheel has a motor, and they're surprisingly capable, particularly in snow and mud and wet conditions where you really benefit from a front wheel drive motorcycle, configuration. And I know that they've got some new developments coming out that's going to increase the power of the rear motor, which I think will make a huge difference. But they were really fun, and they were easy for people to ride. I put my dad on one, and within minutes he was grinning from ear to ear. Never ridden a motorcycle in his life. Within minutes, he was grinning from ear to ear. It was great.
It's cool. I mean, electric can be fun. And, I feel like people get caught up in the minutia of being so serious. Electric's fun, man.
It is actually really fun.
And it I guess does shame me a little bit. Scott, we both travel internationally a lot. We're behind in America. I know that this is a global podcast. This is Overland Journal, but a lot of our listeners are in North America. And we're not only in terms of opinion, but in terms of execution, we are way behind on this new wave of technology. And, I was in China maybe a year or so ago, and they have electric garbage trucks. They have electric buses. Everybody's running around on little electric bicycles and scooters.
And I wonder how much of that is the car culture that we have. I suspect that some of that is because we have driven so much technology innovation in other areas. I think that because it is a car culture, if you just think about us two and the number of cars that we've owned and the obscurity of them, we're attracted to that. Either that idea of like you had a Corvette, a very fast car. You've owned sports cars.
I guess that's public now. Thanks, Scott. Yeah. I've had a bunch of stuff.
Right. And those kinds of vehicles are exciting. And I think that that's part of the American culture. It's part of the American innovation culture. It's part of the American pop culture is cars.
Yeah.
And as soon as they start to make electric vehicles exciting, which is what Tesla has done, make them super, super fast.
So think about that. So yeah, I had a Corvette Z06 for a hot minute, LT4 supercharged, 650 horsepower, 650 foot-pounds of torque, tires in the back as wide as, I don't know, a desk.
Right.
But guess what's faster than that? With 4 doors, air conditioning, autonomous driving capability, like a Tesla Model S is already faster. Like,
yeah, they're insane.
The Tesla Cybertruck is faster 0 to 60.
Yeah, it's
like
insane.
The internal combustion engine is outdated. There's a reason why Porsche is doing the 918 hybrid. It has electric motors. Like that's the only way that they could actually physically get the vehicle to go faster.
And we're also not saying, I guess, kind of to wrap this whole concept up, we're not saying that electric vehicle is the only way in the future. And we're not saying that someone who drives an internal combustion diesel Land Cruiser 20 years from now is somehow a Luddite. I think that they'll still have their place. I think it's more about adopting the excitement around new technology.
Yeah.
Because what that allows for us to do then is hopefully to go explore more.
Yeah.
It allows us to use the same vehicle every day that we use for the backcountry because it has such a breadth of capability, which is what a lot of this new innovation and technology will do. I just recently got an iPhone 11 Pro Max, and it has 3 cameras on it. It has far more computing power than a computer of even a decade or so ago.
Yeah.
A lot more solid state memory. And it's amazing the amount of work that I can do on that device. It's amazing the amount of imagery and content that I can capture and share on that device, which didn't even exist.
Yeah, that
15 years ago.
Game changer.
It's a game changer.
That wide angle lens, just
insane.
To be able to change perspective is.
I used to always bring a wide angle lens with me. I don't bring a wide angle lens anymore because it was only for very specific applications, like the inside of a vehicle, inside of a car, inside of a tent. I can now take all of those photos with the phone. So I think electric vehicles are exciting. I cannot wait to see what Rivian comes out with next.
I'm all for it. I mean, and again, you're totally right. This doesn't have to be for everybody. Nobody's trying to shove this down your throat. Nobody's saying you have to have an electric car. I just think it's important to keep an open mind. One of the few places America is really excelling right now is electric cars, and
we need that. We need that innovation.
We need it because the car companies that you're defending are sent. They're sending the jobs overseas. So the same people that seem to be hating electric cars and are waving the American flag are supporting companies that, do they really care? You have Tesla that's making cars in America.
Making cars in California. That's pretty shocking.
Yeah. Like that's awesome. But you can, I don't know. It's an interesting world.
And it's an exciting time. And there's been a lot of innovation in the overland space. And this is just one of them. And we want to touch on these topics in the future. So look for more technology discussions from the Overland Journal podcast as we continue down the trail. Thanks for listening.
See you guys.